Two major defense companies are in a battle for the future of Canada's fighter jet fleet. Sweden's Saab Gripen versus U.S. firm Lockheed Martin's F-35s.
Locked in a trade fight with Donald Trump, you may have heard that the Carney government is reconsidering its multi-billion-dollar purchase of American F-35 fighter jets.
Ottawa sticking to its plan to buy Lockheed's F-35 fighter jets. So last week, Prime Minister Mark Carney ordered a review of Canada's contract to buy 88 F-35 fighter jets.
January 2026 opened with a confrontation few expected and even fewer were prepared for. A defense contract signed years earlier suddenly sits at the center of a political storm, one that stretches far beyond fighter jets and procurement spreadsheets. Washington is watching closely, Ottawa is holding its ground, and the public is paying attention in a way rarely seen for military policy. At stake is not only how Canada defends its skies, but how it defines its future in an era of rising pressure from powerful allies. What unfolds next will test the limits of loyalty, independence, and political courage. In early January, Washington delivered a message that landed hard in Ottawa. Officials made it clear that the existing structure of North American air defense would not remain untouched if Canada continued to question its commitment to the F-35 program. Behind closed doors and in carefully worded public remarks, the implication was unmistakable. Long-standing assumptions about cooperation were now conditional. The United States ambassador expressed open anger over Canada's willingness to revisit a deal that had already been announced and partially executed. For decades, such pressure would have been enough to force alignment. This time, it was not. Canada's original commitment was massive. A 27.7 billion Canadian dollar agreement tied Ottawa to the purchase of 88 F-35 aircraft from Lockheed Martin, with the first 16 already on the delivery timeline. The plan was framed as inevitable, a natural extension of alliance politics and shared defense priorities. Yet, as deliveries approached, the political environment shifted dramatically. Trade disputes escalated, tariffs multiplied, and rhetoric from Washington grew more confrontational. When Donald Trump openly floated the idea of annexing Canada as the 51st state, a line was crossed in the public consciousness. Defense procurement stopped feeling abstract and started feeling personal. Into that moment stepped Sweden's Saab with a proposal that rewrote the conversation. Instead of matching the F-35 aircraft for aircraft, Saab offered a different vision altogether. The package included 72 Gripen E fighters, 6 GlobalEye airborne early warning aircraft, domestic assembly lines, technology sharing, and a projected 12,600 Canadian jobs. The GlobalEye platforms would be built on Bombardier aircraft, tying the deal directly to Canada's own aerospace industry. The message was carefully crafted and impossible to miss. This was not a simple sale. It was a partnership built around control, participation, and long-term industrial presence. What made the offer politically explosive was not its price tag or its job numbers alone, but the philosophy behind it. Saab was offering access to source code, a level of control that Lockheed Martin has never extended to F-35 customers. Brazil had already secured similar rights, allowing its Air Force to modify systems, integrate weapons, and plan upgrades without waiting for approval from Washington. Saab signaled that Canada could negotiate the same arrangement. In contrast, every F-35 software change flows through American authorization channels, with Lockheed Martin maintaining tight control over the aircraft's digital core. That distinction struck a nerve. Defense experts began framing the debate around control rather than capability. Under the F-35 program, even routine upgrades require external approval. Weapons integration, sensor adjustments, and mission software remain subject to Pentagon oversight. Critics argue that this structure places operational sovereignty at risk, particularly during political disputes. The Gripen model, while not completely independent, offered Canada far greater freedom to manage its own fleet. Total autonomy remained impossible due to the Gripen's American-made engine, which still requires export licenses, yet the level of dependency was clearly lower. Public reaction was swift and unusually unified. A December 2025 EcoS poll revealed that 72% of Canadians supported selecting the Gripen over the F-35. That number cut across party lines and regions, signaling a broader shift in how defense choices were being perceived. This was not a protest vote or a symbolic preference. It reflected frustration with being treated as a junior partner expected to accept terms without negotiation. For many Canadians, the fighter jet debate had become a proxy for a much larger conversation about respect and agency. Washington responded with pressure rather than persuasion. Ambassador Pete Hoekstra warned publicly that failure to purchase the full complement of 88 F-35 aircraft would force changes to NORAD operations. American jets would fly more frequently over Canadian territory, and the United States would compensate by expanding its own fleet. The underlying message carried weight. If Canada did not comply, Washington would act unilaterally. Questions followed immediately. Who would truly control Canadian airspace under that arrangement, and at what political cost? Ottawa chose not to retreat. Industry Minister Mélanie Joly made it clear that procurement decisions would be used to extract greater economic returns. Speaking to Bloomberg, she stated that Canada expected more than the existing 15.5 billion Canadian dollars in industrial benefits tied to the F-35 program. This approach marked a sharp break from past practice. Canada's geography matters. The Gripen E was designed to operate from short runways and even snow-covered highways, an ability that aligns with northern and dispersed basing requirements. Maintenance cycles are shorter, allowing faster turnaround and higher readiness rates. Independent estimates place Gripen mission capability between 80 and 90%. By comparison, reports from the U.S. Government Accountability Office show the F-35 struggling to consistently exceed 50% readiness. Cost differences further complicated the picture. Each F-35 flight hour carries a price tag between $35,000 and $47,000, while the Gripen operates at roughly $8,000 per hour. Former senior military leaders weighed in with blunt assessments. Lieutenant General Yvon Blondin argued that in a high-intensity conflict involving Russia or China, the F-35 would deliver near-total effectiveness, while the Gripen would fall far short. Former Chief of the Defense Staff Tom Lawson echoed that view, dismissing the Gripen as inadequate for modern war. Their warnings carried credibility, yet critics countered with a fundamental question. What kind of conflict was Canada realistically preparing to fight? And under whose command would that fight unfold? The issue grew even more complex with the reality of split fleets. Canada had already committed to receiving 16 F-35 aircraft, with deliveries scheduled at Luke Air Force Base in Arizona before eventual transfer home. Choosing the Gripen for the remaining fleet would require operating two entirely different systems: separate training pipelines, spare parts inventories, maintenance infrastructure, and weapons integration would drive costs higher and increase logistical strain. Military planners warned that such complexity could undermine readiness rather than enhance it. Despite those concerns, domestic pressure continued to build. Canada's aerospace sector rallied behind the Gripen proposal. Bombardier, facing uncertainty about its long-term role in defense production, viewed the Saab partnership as a lifeline. Analysts noted that the promised assembly lines in Ontario and Quebec would embed Canada into a global supply chain, rather than positioning it as a passive buyer. Some defense economists suggested that success could transform Canada into a North American manufacturing hub for Gripen exports, reshaping its industrial base for decades. Meanwhile, Washington watched closely. Lockheed Martin remained publicly confident while quietly lobbying to preserve the full contract. Saab intensified its outreach, emphasizing technology transfer and domestic control. Negotiations unfolded along parallel tracks, one focused on extracting greater concessions from Lockheed Martin, the other on evaluating Saab's broader industrial offer. The long-delayed government assessment, overdue since September 2025, remained unreleased, fueling speculation and uncertainty. international observers began framing the situation as a test case. Smaller NATO countries monitored Canada's stance with keen interest. If Ottawa succeeded in pushing back against American pressure while remaining within alliance structures, it would demonstrate that alternatives existed. If Canada retreated, the lesson would be equally clear. Public support and economic logic would matter less than pressure from a superpower. Examples from abroad added urgency. Denmark, already operating the F-35, voiced open frustration over aircraft availability and maintenance downtime. Analysts pointed to those experiences as warnings rather than anomalies. The choice facing Canada no longer fit neatly into a debate about hardware. It revolved around dependence versus autonomy, alliance discipline versus national control, and whether technological sovereignty could coexist with collective defense. As months pass, the silence from Ottawa grows heavier. The decision expected in 2026 will ripple far beyond the Royal Canadian Air Force. It will influence how future governments approach procurement, how industries plan investments, and how allies calculate leverage. One path maintains maximum combat capability at the cost of deep technological reliance. The other builds domestic control and industrial strength while accepting operational trade-offs and political risk. None of the paths in front of Canada offer comfort or certainty because every option trades one kind of risk for another. Is it wiser to anchor national defense to unmatched combat capability, even if that means long-term reliance on another country's systems and approvals? Or does true security come from the ability to control, adapt, and sustain military power without outside permission? How much dependence can an ally accept before it quietly reshapes national identity? And at what point does strategic alignment begin to feel like strategic surrender? These questions are no longer theoretical. They are sitting on the desks of decision-makers in Ottawa right now, waiting for an answer that will define Canada's role, not only in North America, but on the global stage for decades to come. If you want to keep exploring stories like this, where power, politics, and sovereignty collide behind closed doors, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Every interaction helps keep this kind of analysis alive and visible. Thank you for watching.